he was quite taken by General Munir's statement that he was going to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is what motivates Trump. This doesn't reflect the new strategic relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan. It reflects Donald Trump getting General Munir to do what he most wants to have him do. I think Trump has simply misunderstood a lot of what's going on between India and Pakistan, as in his claim to have stopped the war. This is one of his the items on his resume for a Nobel Peace Prize that I don't think anybody outside of Trump's own circle believes. I don't think the Pakistanis believed it. I think after the terrorist attack, that where there was an Indian response, that as in other cases, India and Pakistan worked it out themselves, and Trump was an insignificant factor.
It's okay for General Munir to go around and saying that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize publicly, or offer him a crypto deal as Pakistan has done for him and his family. These are not things that any mature democracy can do. Pakistan can. Pakistan is not a democracy. It is basically run by the army, so he can do whatever he wants to.
It's a problem for many of our allies. There's no doubt about it. And in that sense, in the famous line from the movie The Godfather, that India can recognize it's nothing personal. This is just the way Trump goes about his business. I think it's harmful for the United States. I think Trump has shredded decades of effort by successive American presidents to build confidence with our friends and allies, in the case of India, to develop closer ties. And much of that effort, which was difficult and long in the process, is now being set back substantially. I think it's important to understand that Trump's term is coming to an end. It may seem like a long time, 2.5 years, but we're 1.5 years in already to the second term. And if you look at the first and the second term, his presidency is 2/3 over. So while there's still some difficult days ahead, they are dwindling. And every day that goes by without a crisis is a good day. It's also a missed opportunity. And so I would say to India, keep your eyes on the prize of what the long-range strategic interests are. Try to avoid the difficulties that Trump himself causes.
We have with us John Bolton. He was once inside Trump's national security room. Today, he is one of Trump's sharpest critics in the room. So what does John Bolton make of the India-US trust, the return of Pakistani PRISM, and the Iran deal, and a world reordered by Trump? So I'm going to start with a direct question. You were once one of the strongest advocates of closer India-US strategic ties during the first Trump administration. Today, many Indians believe that those ties are under not just a strain, I would call it they're under siege. Would you agree to that?
Well, I think there's some very serious difficulties, largely caused by President Trump, who can't keep focused on big strategic questions and is frequently diverted by what's right in front of him at any given time. I think the biggest mistake of the second term, though, is the question of tariffs. These have been applied against India in very unfortunate ways. My complaint is the entire Trump tariff policy is wrong. I think there are strategic issues involved in trade where the biggest problem is China, where in fact the U.S. and India, I think, see things much the same way. But instead, with India and with many other allies and friends around the world, Trump has engaged in a trade war that's not going to help relations. In fact, will hurt the U.S. economy as well as hurt their economies. I think that's where a lot of the problems go back to.
It's just not been about tariff. It's been a whole lot of things, including Pakistan. India, it doesn't seem like America's most important strategic partner in Asia at all at this point in time. Trump went to China. He said he loved China. He loves Pakistan. In fact, he seems to love every other country except India at this point in time.
Well, as I say, his attention span is short. And so things in front of him occupy him, whereas longer term, actually more important issues sometimes escape his attention. I think this is a mistake on his part. And I would just say from India's perspective, I wouldn't read too much into what Trump doesn't do, because they're not. It's not based on strategic considerations. If you look at Pakistan, with which I think it's important for the U.S. to have good relations independently of India, uh, he was quite taken by General Munir's statement that he was going to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is what motivates Trump. This doesn't reflect the new strategic relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan. It reflects Donald Trump getting General Munir to do what he most wants to have him do. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive, that matters of high strategic importance are dealt with by Donald Trump as matters of his personal preferences, but that's the way he is.
I'm going to come back to Pakistan, but I just want to talk about the China factor for a moment. At the Raisina dialogue this year, a US official said that India should understand that we are, which is the US, not going to make the same mistake with India that we made with China 20 years ago. Is the current downturn in relation to that view prevailing in the US establishment, or is it just one of those statements attributed to an individual?
Well, I think these are that is a statement made by somebody obviously who owes his job to Donald Trump and is trying to say where he thinks Trump will be at some point in the future. I don't know anybody outside Trump and his immediate advisors who would agree with that statement. I think it's obviously going to be a complex road ahead here. I don't underestimate the issues that have to be resolved, but I think it's the common threat of China along its Indo-Pacific periphery that unites thinking in many countries, and we see that in the Asian Security Quad, which was pushed very hard by former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, including obviously India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. It's a shame Trump hasn't done more to take that up. But I don't think there's any serious observer in the United States who doesn't continue to believe that India is going to be a critical player throughout the rest of the century, and that it's just contrary to America's own national interest not to try and find closer strategic ties.
Moving back to Pakistan, during the Biden years, it had appeared that Pakistan was strategically sidelined. Under Trump, many Indians feel that Pakistani prism has returned. Is that a fair assessment? The Pakistani prism through which the United States views India.
Well, I hope that's not correct for the population as a whole. I don't think it is. I think it may be for Trump because of the way Pakistan has performed, beginning with General Munir's offer to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, offering in recent months to be a mediator in the conflict with Iran, and other steps that Pakistan has taken. So it's a question of how you play Trump. And I think Munir read the playbook perhaps from the first term and has done it very well. I don't begrudge that to Pakistan. That's their decision to make. And we do have issues of concern specifically relating to Afghanistan that keep us engaged. But I think Trump has simply misunderstood a lot of what's going on between India and Pakistan, as in his claim to have stopped the war. This is one of the items on his resume for a Nobel Peace Prize that I don't think anybody outside of Trump's own circle believes. I don't think the Pakistanis believed it. I think after the terrorist attack,
True.
that where there was an Indian response, that as in other cases, India and Pakistan worked it out themselves, and Trump was an insignificant factor.
India will obviously not be concerned, or will not be comfortable, rather, at the manner in which, as you pointed out, Trump appears to be wooing Pakistan and vice versa. It's okay for General Munir to go around and saying that, he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize publicly, or offer him a crypto deal as Pakistan has done for him and his family. These are not things that any mature democracy can do. Pakistan can. Pakistan is not a democracy. It is basically run by the army, so he can do whatever he wants to. But let's look at India. Let's look at even America's European allies. They can't be doing such favors and doing such deals with Trump.
Well, it's a problem for many of our allies. There's no doubt about it, and in that sense, in the famous line from the movie The Godfather, that India can recognize it's nothing personal. This is just the way Trump goes about his business. I think it's harmful for the United States. I think Trump has shredded decades of effort by successive American presidents to build confidence with our friends and allies, in the case of India, to develop closer ties. And much of that effort, which was difficult and long in the process, is now being set back substantially. So I don't think it's something though that reflects a permanent American direction. I think Trump remains an aberration in American politics, and much of what he says and does is aberrational as well.
From your experience, why does Pakistan continue to retain influence in parts of the US security establishment, let's say in this case, Trump and his inner circle, despite decades of concern over terrorism, or for that matter, double dealing or proliferation?
Well, one of the things I think that the George W. Bush administration succeeded, and I think in the aftermath of 9/11, it was critical, was to break the linkage, the hyphenization, as it was sometimes called, the Pakistan-India hyphenated relationship as seen by the U.S., and to say, look, this is not fundamentally an American interest to be constantly balancing Pakistan off against India and vice versa. We need a stable and advancing relationship with India, regardless of what Pakistan does, and similarly with Pakistan. Certainly, there are more issues where the U.S. and India have common cause, I think, than the U.S. does at this point with Pakistan. The overall threat of China being number one, the continuing global threat of terrorism being another. And by the way, the economic prosperity of our citizens being uppermost on our citizens' minds, even if not necessarily the top decision makers. So there's much to talk about here, much less in the case of Pakistan, for well or ill. Trump talks about massive American investment in Pakistan. There's simply no evidence that is in prospect, and but it's part of the way he performs. He just says things that he wishes were true, and expects others to believe them as well.
Well, that is all true. And what you're saying, does one does understand that, given what we've seen of Donald Trump in his second term so far. But does Washington genuinely accept India's rise? The fact that it's not just a balancing power, it's a leading power in the world now, or is there still discomfort about a fully independent India, about a rising India, an India which demands its space on the global stage?
No, I don't think there's any concern about that at all. I think, the basis of any successful foreign policy has to be reality. And the reality is India's performance over decades has brought it to a point that was inevitable sooner rather than later. And I think that's entirely a positive factor from the U.S. perspective. I think there's still a lot to be done to resolve differences that have built up historically. But the fact is, looking at what we, I think, mutually see as the major threat to peace and stability, certainly in the Indo-Pacific region, that joint action really makes a lot of sense. There's no particular formula there to follow. I think this is a unique situation. We can take comfort from the fact that many others in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific really are looking for the United States and India to find a way ahead that will bring stability and security for all of them as well. So this is it's not something that makes the United States uncomfortable. Number one, it's inevitable, and that is just a basis on which any sound foreign policy has to proceed. But second, I think there are a lot of areas of mutual advantage here that are worth exploring. Trump tends to focus on trade. I think it's because it's in dollars and cents. He thinks he understands it. But much of what he says on trade is simply wrong, the tariffs being a good example. And the time that gets taken up there and the aggravation that all trade negotiations seem to produce gets in the way of many of the other more strategic issues that I think warrant our mutual attention.
And if you were advising New Delhi today, what would be your biggest warning about dealing with Donald Trump's America?
Well, I think it's important to understand that Trump's term is coming to an end. It may seem like a long time, 2.5 years, but we're 1.5 years in already to the second term. And if you look at the first and the second term, his presidency is two-thirds over. So while there's still some difficult days ahead, they are dwindling. And every day that goes by without a crisis is a good day. It's also a missed opportunity. And so I would say to India, keep your eyes on the prize of what the long range strategic interests are. Try to avoid the difficulties that Trump himself causes. As a friend of mine once said, the best way to deal with Trump is if it's like you're watching a TV program, just turn the sound off. Watch the program, but don't listen to the voices.
Okay. All right. On that note, I would just like to shift focus a little to Iran for a moment because any conversation today cannot be completed without Iran and the US-Iran deal. What was your first reaction when you saw the contours of the new US-Iran agreement?
Well, I think it's a terrible deal. I think, in effect, it gives the regime in Tehran the impression that it can open and close the Strait of Hormuz like turning a light switch on and off. In fact, this is an international waterway. All commercial vessels, indeed, all military vessels, should have a right of innocent passage. It's not for Iran or for Iran and Oman to dictate who comes through under what terms. And I think it was a mistake because the regime now is regrouping and will become more dangerous than it has been as revenues from oil come in to allow it to rebuild its military, rebuild the Revolutionary Guard, rebuild its nuclear program, and continue the repression of the Iranian people. I think Trump was focused entirely on getting the price of gasoline down for consumers in the United States, having in mind our congressional elections in November. I don't think he understood, let alone considered, the strategic implications, not just for the U.S., but for the rest of the world in this deal. And I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah, because it seems that the United States gave away a lot. Neither has there been a regime change, nor is the Hormuz really open. It was actually open before the US bombed Iran. I mean, how do you explain that?
Well, it's hard to understand why Trump and wasn't prepared for both the closing of the Strait of Hormuz and the attacks by Iran on the Gulf Arab countries. Everybody in the military understood that was a possibility. Trump didn't seem to think it would happen. The one thing you can say is now that the Iranians have played that card, that nobody can ignore the geographic reality of the Strait of Hormuz anymore. But by allowing Iran to close the strait and not pay a penalty is a big mistake. I think the U.S. should have kept the blockade on the export of Iranian oil and used military force to open the strait for Gulf Arab oil traffic to come out, so that would have increased international supplies, would have brought the price down, and would have helped American consumers. This is a mistake I think that will continue to come back and haunt us as time goes on.
Right. And does this deal make Israel safer or more vulnerable in your opinion?
Well, I think it's important that people understand the damage that was done during the 6 weeks of bombing by the U.S. and Israel was very substantial. Iran's military industrial complex is badly damaged. Its nuclear program damaged. Its air force, its navy, its air defenses, many of its missiles, missile launchers, its drone program, the Quds force, the besieged militia, all severely damaged. And it will take Iran a long time to build back to the threat level it was before. Iran did, however, score a political victory because of the Strait of Hormuz, and that was, from the U.S. point of view, totally a self-inflicted wound by the Trump administration.
And if this deal collapses, let's say in the next 2 years, who do you think is going to bear the political blame for this?
Well, I think it'll be Trump. I don't think there's any question about it. I think he's very reluctant to use military force before the November elections in the U.S. I think the Iranian regime can see that, and they're using it to leverage their position. Whether Trump will change after the election, I don't know, but a lot of damage could occur over the next 4 months.
And if you were to get an hour alone with the president today, what would be the single most, let's say, important national security warning you would give him?
Well, I think it has to be focused on the Chinese threat. This is the biggest threat for the U.S. and I think international peace and security generally for the rest of the century. The Chinese are expert at strategic planning. They have a long perspective, but that doesn't mean that because their threat is not imminent and visible right now, that the threat is not there. We have to deal with this over the long term, and to do that effectively, we need partners in the region and worldwide.
And given what's happening right now, and my last question to you, 20 years from now, when historians write about Trump and they describe him, what do you think they will describe him as? As the man who strengthened American power, or the man who accelerated perhaps the end of the American-led world order?
Well, I hope it's the former, but I have my doubts. I just think Trump doesn't focus from 1 minute to the next on the big picture. And there are times when he benefits from that, but mostly the country does not benefit from it. And his uneasy hand, I think, has led the U.S. into some severe mistakes just in the first year and a half of this second term. It's possible still to correct them, but more damage could be done. And I think whoever succeeds him in the White House is going to have a very difficult time repairing the damage that he's caused.
Yeah, and onwards to the midterms now. What do you think your assessment of where the Republicans are headed, along with all the things that Trump has brought on the table in the last 1.5 years?
I think most observers believe the Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives, that the Senate is a toss up. My guess is it's still likely to remain Republican, but I think Trump's going to have a very difficult 2 years, the remainder of his term. I think the chances of getting any significant domestic legislation through Congress are close to zero. I think it's going to be a very frustrating time for him answering all the charges that are going to be leveled at him in his conduct of the government, and really charges of personal corruption against him and his family.
Right, because one has not seen the kind of money that the Trump family seems to have made in the last 1.5 years. I was reading some reports. That itself is quite a fortune.
Well, I think that's correct. A lot of the issues that are discussed in Washington don't necessarily get a lot of public attention elsewhere. But I think the issue of personal corruption cuts through with every voter, and I think that's where Trump's greatest vulnerability is.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you have a hard out now, but thank you for speaking to us, and thank you viewers for watching this certificate. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.